The plains had a way of swallowing sound, wind folding itself over the golden grasses like a mother smoothing a child's hair. Eli Turner rode alone, as he often did, with only the creak of his saddle and the occasional snort of his gelding to mark the passage of time. June's sun pressed down hot as a branding iron, but he wore his hat low, brim shadowing his face like a curtain drawn tight. He wasn't expecting to find anything that morning, not so far from the cattle trails or outposts. The land here was wild and mostly forgotten, except by the ones who couldn't forget. That's why the buzzards startled him. A black wheel of them, circling above a lone cottonwood, meant trouble. Death, maybe. Eli angled his horse toward the tree without thought, just that old ranch hand instinct to face whatever needed facing. At first, he saw nothing, just the cottonwood standing like a sad monument against the blue sky, bark bleached pale by wind and time. But then he saw it. Fabric, the flutter of it, too long and limp to be hanging by choice. A rope, a figure. His stomach turned cold. He was off the horse before he finished thinking. She hung awkwardly, her wrists bound and tied above her head, feet barely brushing the dust. Not dead, no, he saw the chest move, shallow but steady. She was young, maybe 17, maybe less, an Apache. Her dress was torn, dark hair matted with blood. Pinned to the tree above her was a rough wooden board, letters scorched into it with a hot blade. "White man doesn't forgive." Eli stood a long moment, his breath caught somewhere between fury and confusion. This wasn't justice, this was message-making. Someone wanted to be heard. He cut her down carefully, cradling her light body in his arms. She didn't wake. Her skin was hot, fevered, and bruised in places no man had any right to leave a mark. Guilt, sharp and stinging, surged through him, though he had no hand in this. Still, he was white, and that sign meant for him. He bundled her into the saddle with a gentleness he didn't know he had, wrapping his duster around her thin shoulders. They moved slow, back toward the foothills, toward the shack he used when running fence or trailing strays too far from the main ranch. He didn't speak. She didn't stir. When they reached the line shack, a squat one-room cabin tucked between cottonwoods and a spring-fed creek, he laid her on his bunk, covered her with a quilt stitched long ago by his sister, who'd died from fever and too many winters. He stoked the fire, boiled water, cleaned her wounds with cloth and whiskey. Night fell quiet, only the crackle of flame and the slow rasp of her breathing. He kept to his side of the room, sat in the corner, sharpening his knife out of habit, eyes flicking to her now and again. Come morning, she opened her eyes. Dark, sharp, wary. Her lips parted but made no sound. She tried to sit but winced. Eli held up both hands, palms wide. "I ain't here to hurt you," he said softly. "You're safe." She didn't believe him, he could see that clear. But she didn't run either, just watched him like a deer deciding which way the wind blew. He pointed to himself. "Eli." She said nothing. He gestured to her gently. "You got a name?" She looked away. Maybe she did. Maybe she wouldn't give it. That too was fair. They passed the day in silence. He cooked beans, tore cornbread, left water and a clean shirt near her pallet. She didn't touch the food until he stepped outside. That night he sat on the porch, moonlight spilling silver over the grass. Somewhere out there, whoever hung her might be watching. The thought made him reach for the rifle resting against the door. He didn't ask what she'd done. He'd known Apaches who'd raided wagon trains, yes, but he'd also seen white men burn whole camps and call it honor. The truth of what happened didn't live in signs nailed to trees. It lived in quiet moments like this one, where a girl breathed soft under his roof, and a man tried to understand how the world got so twisted. Inside, she slept, or pretended to, and Eli, sitting under the stars, felt something shift inside him, like a gate swinging open on rusty hinges, unsure but willing. The next morning, the girl rose before Eli. He found her crouched near the hearth, gently stirring the last embers of last night's fire back to life. She moved quietly, wrapped in the blue checkered shirt he'd left out, sleeves rolled above her wrists. The bruises on her arms were healing into yellows and greens. Her long hair, once matted with blood, had been washed and lay in damp ropes down her back. She didn't look at him as he stepped inside, just fed kindling into the fire and sat back on her heels. He offered a nod. "You sleep all right?" She didn't answer, but her head dipped slightly. Eli wasn't a man who needed many words, and he figured she wasn't either. That made things easier in some ways. He poured 2 tin cups of coffee, set one beside her on the floor. She stared at it like it might bite her, then wrapped both hands around it, the way folks do when trying to remember what warmth feels like. "You got family nearby?" he asked gently. She shook her head. Then, almost too quiet to hear, she said, "Gone." The word landed between them like an axe sunk into a stump, final splitting. Eli felt it in his gut. He didn't ask more. For days, their rhythm became something soft and wordless. He'd rise early, mend fence lines or check snares, always keeping within an hour's ride of the shack. She stayed close, swept the floor with a pine bough, gathered water from the creek, stitched the tear in the old quilt with a needle he hadn't touched in years. They spoke little, but there was something in their silence that began to change shape. It no longer felt empty. One rainy evening, he returned, soaked through, and found her crouched beside the stove, humming, just a thread of sound, high and tremulous like a bird remembering a song. She stopped when she saw him, but Eli smiled. "That tune," he said, shrugging off his slick coat. "I liked it." She looked down, shy. "My mother sang it." He didn't press her, but something cracked open in her voice then, a sliver of memory or trust. She told him her name, Tayan. It meant new moon, she said. She told him she was from the Sierra foothills. Her people had been pushed out after settlers laid claim to the springs. Her father died defending their land. Her brother was taken when he went to barter for grain. She'd been caught outside the village one morning, gathering wild onions when the men came. Soldiers? Ranchers? She didn't know. Just men with pale eyes and rough hands. "They left me," she said simply, voice flat, "so others would see." Eli sat by the fire, boots steaming, heart clenching tight in his chest. "I'm sorry," he said. It felt small, but it was all he had. Tayan looked at him then, eyes shining not with tears but something harder, grief worn into bone. "I don't want sorry," she said. "Just peace." The wind howled against the windows. Eli poured her another cup of coffee, added a splash of sugar, "Then peace you'll have." That night she fell asleep curled near the stove, the warmth turning her cheeks pink. He watched her for a while, then stepped outside, letting the door shut soft behind him. The rain had turned to mist, and the prairie shimmered like glass beneath the moon. He walked a few paces, stared out over the dark land, and wondered how long they could keep this pocket of peace safe. What they had here, this quiet, this shared stillness, it wasn't something the world gave often, and it certainly didn't like letting it stay. Inside, she dreamed. He could hear the soft hitch of her breath, like she was running through memories she didn't want but couldn't put down. He wished he could protect her from them all, but he knew better. Some things weren't his to fix. Still, when he came back in, he laid another log on the fire, slow and careful not to wake her. She didn't stir, but her hand twitched in her sleep, reaching toward the warmth. Days passed, and something gentle took root between them. Not love, not yet, but the kind of trust that grows in small, slow ways. A second helping of stew, a shared laugh over a stubborn mule, a touch on the arm that lingered a breath too long. One afternoon she asked, "Why do you live out here?" Eli was whittling a handle for a broken lantern. He looked up, surprised at the question. "Used to be a rancher," he said. "Had land, family, lost it in the drought. My brother headed east. I stayed." "Why?" He gave her a half smile. "I guess I like the quiet." She nodded as if she understood more than he said. They sat like that until dusk, two people shaped by loss, stitched together by silence, neither daring to speak of the flicker beginning to glow between them. The days shortened and softened, the sky often brushed with the quiet rose and lavender of early autumn. A peace settled in Eli's line shack that neither he nor Tayan dared name aloud, like whispering it would break the fragile thing they had built. She had taken to tending the little patch of ground behind the shack. Not much would grow in the dry soil, but she coaxed wild herbs into order, gathered yarrow and mint from the creek's edge. Her hands moved with purpose, and Eli, watching from the porch while mending tack, felt something strange swell in his chest. A feeling he hadn't known since before the war, before his world had buckled under the weight of loss. One evening, a cold wind swept down from the north. Eli set out a second quilt for Tayan and made rabbit stew with beans and potatoes, thick and steaming. She smiled faintly when she took the bowl, and he saw her eyes crease at the corners, a smile that carried real warmth. "You cook like a woman," she teased, surprising him. Eli chuckled, spoon halfway to his mouth. "I'll take that as praise." "It is," she said. Then her smile softened into something smaller. "My mother said men who cook make kind husbands." Eli paused, caught off guard. The word husband lodged somewhere in his throat, too big, too sudden. But Tayan had already looked away, sipping her broth. Perhaps it was nothing more than memory for her. But still the image came to him unbidden. Tayan in the doorway with a babe on her hip, laughter in the air instead of silence. He swallowed hard. Later that night, he found her outside, standing barefoot in the grass under the stars. She was wrapped in the quilt, hair loose and dark against the moonlight. He approached slow, boots crunching on gravel. "Too cold for bare feet," he said. She looked up. "I like how the earth feels. It reminds me I'm still part of it." He didn't know what to say to that. He just nodded, then stood beside her. "You ever afraid?" she asked suddenly. "Not of dying, but of loving again." Her voice was small, but it didn't tremble. Eli felt the question settle deep in his bones. He didn't answer right away. He looked at her profile, lit silver by the moon. Her face was healing, fuller. Her spirit still carried scars, but he saw the light returning to her like spring thaw after a brutal frost. "Yeah," he said at last. "I'm afraid, but I think not loving might be worse." She turned toward him slowly, her eyes wide and unguarded. In that stillness, he reached out, brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. She leaned into his touch. Nothing more than that. No grand declarations. Just shared breath beneath a prairie sky and something true unfolding like a petal in the dark. That night, she laid her hand atop his as he sat by the fire, and he didn't move it. Didn't speak. He just held it, both of them looking into the flames like it might tell them what came next. But peace is a fragile thing out here. It came 3 mornings later, a single horse galloping down the ridge. Eli saw the rider before Tayan did. He squinted, jaw tightening. Dust rose in a plume behind the stranger, and something about the way the man rode made Eli's gut twist. He grabbed his rifle from above the door. Tayan came to his side, eyes scanning the horizon. "Who?" Eli didn't answer, not yet. The rider came close enough for Eli to see the red bandana tied to his arm. Blood marker. Eli cursed low. It was Tanner Yates, a man Eli once knew from cattle drives. Hard-drinking, hot-tempered, and known for settling scores on behalf of ranchers who didn't like natives on their land. Eli stepped forward, gun at his side but not raised. Tanner pulled up short, eyes flicking to the shack behind Eli. "Heard you were playing nursemaid to an Apache?" Eli's jaw clenched. "She was left to die." "That right?" Tanner grinned without mirth. "That's what happens when they kill settlers. Message had to be sent. Didn't figure you'd be the one to erase it." "She's just a girl," Eli said evenly. "She didn't kill nobody." Tanner spat. "Don't matter. She's one of them. Sheriff's looking to make an example." Posse'll be here come tomorrow. Eli didn't flinch. You tell them I'm not handing her over. Tanner's smile vanished. You siding with her? Eli looked back toward the door where Tyen watched from the shadows, then turned back. I'm siding with what's right. Tanner leaned on his saddle horn, long and slow. You're gonna get yourself killed. Maybe, Eli said, but not today. Tanner rode off, but the dust didn't settle in Eli's chest. That night, he packed quietly, laying supplies in the saddlebags, checking Tyen's old moccasins for wear. She stood watching, face pale. You're taking me back? She asked. He looked at her gently. If we ride hard, we can reach the mesa trails near Red Rock. You said your uncle's people range that land? She nodded slowly. I'll get you home, Eli said, even if it's not mine anymore. She reached for his hand again, only this time, she squeezed. He looked at her and saw not a girl anymore, but a woman who had survived hell, who had stitched herself back together in the quiet light of kindness. I want to live, she whispered. And he smiled, soft and full of sorrow. Then we ride a first light. They rode out under the cover of stars, hooves muffled by soft earth, each breath clouding in the cold dawn air. Eli led the way, rifle across his lap, eyes scanning the ridgelines. Tyen followed close behind, wrapped in his old coat, her long hair braided and tucked beneath a bandana. She didn't speak. Neither of them did. There was no room left for words. The trail east wound through low hills and burned-out prairie. Once, this land had been buffalo country. Now it was empty, the ghosts of herds and warriors haunting the wide silence. Tyen knew these paths better than Eli. Her gaze flitted over the horizon like she could still feel the presence of her ancestors in the rock, the wind, the shape of each gnarled tree. By midday, they'd put 20 miles behind them. The horses were tired, but Eli kept pushing. If Tanner had warned the sheriff and a posse had formed, they'd be tracking hard by now. And he'd ridden with enough men like that to know they wouldn't hesitate to shoot first and ask after. They camped in a dry wash as twilight settled in, fireless and cold. Tyen chewed jerky and stared up at the stars, speaking for the first time in hours. My uncle once said the stars are the campfires of those who came before, she murmured. That they watch us, waiting for when we return. Eli looked up too. Think they're watching now? She nodded. I think they're hoping. He didn't know how to respond to that, but he hoped so too. By the third day, the land grew redder, carved into mesas and canyons, the edge of Apache territory. The old ways still held out here. If they could make it another 10 miles, Tyen's people might shelter her, protect her, maybe even protect him, though he didn't dare count on that. But as they crested a bluff at dawn, Eli caught sight of a dust trail behind them, 3 riders, far off but gaining. He cursed under his breath. They're close. Tyen's face tightened. There's a box canyon 2 miles ahead, narrow but hidden. They rode hard, hooves thundering over packed clay. The sun rose fast and hot, baking the fear into Eli's spine. He could see now. 3 men, maybe 4. One had a red bandana on his arm, Tanner. Tyen led them through a narrow chute of rock. The canyon walls rose like broken teeth, ochre and sharp. They ducked low, dismounted, and crouched behind a ledge choked with sage. Eli handed Tyen the rifle, but she shook her head. You shoot better, she said simply. He hesitated, then nodded, placing her behind a boulder. He crouched beside her, steadying his breath. He hated the feel of the gun in his hands, not for what it was, but for what it meant. This wasn't ranch work. This was war. Again. The riders entered the canyon slow, cautious. They'd seen the trail, maybe even guessed the ambush. Eli lined his sights, finger curling against the trigger, but he waited, let them choose. Tanner rode forward, rifle across his lap. You in there, Turner? Eli said nothing. You don't have to die for her, Tanner called. She ain't worth it. None of 'em are. Tayan flinched, her eyes dark with rage, but Eli put a hand on her shoulder. "Don't let him make you small," he whispered. "I see your horse," Tanner said. "You've got one chance. Walk out, hand her over, and I'll say you cooperated." Eli stood up, rifle raised but not aimed. "You'll have to shoot me, Tanner." Tanner laughed, but it was dry and nervous. "Don't think I won't." "I know you will," Eli said, "but just know when you ride back, you'll have to explain why you killed a man who never harmed you, and why you hunted a girl like a wolf chases cubs." A long silence. One of the riders behind Tanner shifted in the saddle, uncertain. Tanner scowled. "You think this makes you a hero, Eli?" "No," he said. "Just a man who's tired of being a coward." For a moment, no one moved. Then, from the canyon rim, came a sharp whistle. All eyes shot upward. Figures appeared at the edge of the cliffs, bows drawn, rifles raised. Apache. Eli dropped to cover Tayan as arrows and bullets echoed against stone, but the fire wasn't aimed at him. It was a warning. The riders fled, spurred back down the trail, Tanner's curses bouncing off the canyon walls. The figures on the cliffs didn't pursue, they simply watched. Tayan stood slowly, heart racing. "They saw my braid," she whispered. "They knew I was one of them." Eli looked at her breathless. "That was your uncle?" She nodded. "Or someone from his band. We're close." They climbed out of the canyon slowly, hands raised in peace. The Apache didn't lower their weapons, but they didn't fire either. An older man stepped forward, face etched like carved wood, his gaze falling on Tayan. "Yata," he said in a low voice. "You are not lost." Tayan stepped forward. "Sena, uncle." They embraced. Eli hung back, uncertain, suddenly aware of how much he didn't belong. But Tayan turned, reaching for him. "This man saved me," she said in her language. "He carries no hate." Her uncle studied him. Long. Deep. At last, he nodded once. "Then he will not be harmed. But the white world must not follow." Eli understood. This was a crossing, not a return. Tayan turned to him, eyes full of something he couldn't quite name. Sorrow, gratitude, maybe love. "I'm safe now," she whispered. "You gave me that." He looked down, the weight of leaving her settling heavy. "I wish I could stay." She took his hand, pressed something into it, a carved bone pendant. "Then part of you will." And with that, she turned, walking toward her people. He watched until she was swallowed by red stone and shadow. The ride back was quiet. Eli took no trail, only the shape of the sun and the pull of his gut guiding him westward. The prairie had changed, not in the way of seasons, but in him. The silence felt heavier now, not cruel but deep, as though it knew something had ended and wouldn't return the same. He kept her pendant close, wore it under his shirt where it rested against his chest, light as a feather, heavy as a vow. The line shack waited just as they'd left it, stoic beneath the cottonwoods, smoke-darkened logs and mossy roof pitched against the sky. The quilt still lay folded at the foot of the bunk. Tayan's footprints were still faintly pressed into the dust near the stove. Eli stood in the doorway a long time before stepping inside. He unpacked slowly, brushed the horses down, set water to boil though he wasn't hungry. It wasn't grief he felt, not entirely. It was something slower, steadier, like watching the last coals of a fire glow in the dark. You don't cry for firelight, you remember it. In the days that followed, he returned to his routines, mending fence, checking for strays, hauling water. He spoke to no one, not because he was hiding, but because there was no one nearby who would understand. But sometimes, at dusk, he would sit outside with his rifle across his lap and stare toward the east. Not hoping to see her, not really, just remembering the shape of her beside him, the way she hummed while shelling beans, or how she sat with her knees pulled to her chest and eyes wide at stories about colts and spring floods. And in those quiet hours, he let himself feel what he hadn't said, that he loved her, that he always would. It wasn't a young man's kind of love. Not burning and wild, it was patient, steady, a kind of reverence for the way she moved through pain and didn't let it hollow her out, for the way she'd touched his life, not like thunder, but like rain soaking into thirsty ground. One evening, nearly a month after their parting, a rider came from the north, a Lakota courier who traded messages between tribes and wandering folks with no true place. He brought a small bundle wrapped in woven grass, said a woman east of the Painted Canyon had asked him to deliver it if ever he crossed paths with a man named Eli Turner. Inside the bundle, a single hawk feather and a strip of tanned hide etched with simple pictographs. A woman under stars, a man by firelight, two rivers meeting. Eli traced the markings with trembling fingers. His vision blurred. She remembered. Not just that he had helped her, but that they had shared something sacred in a world that had tried to strip both of them bare. Later that night, he sat by the fire, pendant in one hand, the feather in the other. He closed his eyes. In the hush, he could almost hear her laugh again. Not loud, just soft, like wind through cottonwood leaves. And he knew, wherever she was safe. That was enough. He didn't need to see her again to know she walked with strength, with fire in her heart and the stars of her ancestors above her. He'd been part of that story, if only for a chapter. And maybe that was what love was sometimes, a moment, not forever, but true just the same. In time, he returned to ranch work, helped an old neighbor mend a barn, even passed through a frontier town once or twice. Folks said he seemed quieter but kinder. He never told them why. Some things are best held close, like a warm quilt on a winter night. Not hidden, just cherished. And in the hush of prairie evenings when the stars blinked awake above the wide, dark land, Eli Turner would sometimes hum a tune he didn't know the words to, a melody from far away, carried on memory and wind. He called it Tayan's song, and it was enough. The plains kept their silence, as they always had, wide and unwavering beneath the endless dome of sky. But something had shifted, subtle as dusk sliding in on soft-soled feet. In that quiet place, a man had laid down his loneliness, and a girl had taken back her life. Eli stayed near the land, his heart more open than before. Sometimes love didn't bloom in weddings or promises. Sometimes it rose like mist, curled between two people for a time, then slipped gently away, leaving only warmth behind. He would never forget the feel of her hand in his, or the way she said his name like it mattered. And she would remember him too, though the world would never mark their story in books or stone. No, their story lived where real things do, in the hush between firelight and sleep, in the aching beauty of a goodbye done right. And as the wind swept through the cottonwoods and coyotes called from the hills, the land held their memory in its breath. Two souls, once lost, now quietly found.